Hey, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Tremor, and today we are going to continue with the Programming 101 series. We are going to do an exercise today, so no theory, but some practical work. I'm going to put myself into the bottom right corner again, and I wrote up some notes to go along with the exercise. And the exercise says the following. Write a command line calculator which provides the following operations: addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, exponentiation, the square root, and summing up the first n natural numbers. So if we sum up the first 10 natural numbers, then we want to sum like 1 plus 2 plus 3 up until 10. The calculator should provide a command line menu, so the user can choose the different operations. After each operation was completed successfully, the result should be displayed and the user should be presented with the menu again. And the last option in the menu should be to quit the program. And there's also a homework for you, but we'll talk about that later. So I would say let's jump straight in and go from top to bottom. So we start with the menu. And we will be using pretty much everything that we learned up until now. So let's start with the menu. I will be making a function which will take care of printing the menu to the console. I'm going to call it print menu. By the way, I didn't prepare anything, so this is like live programming, so please bear with me. So printing the menu. Let's start with a headline, like a heading. Let's just say menu and a new line. And I'm going to underline that as well. I just call the method already and see if it works. Oh, we get the menu and, well, a couple too many underlines. That's enough. And a new line as well. And I'm just going to print two new lines here. So we have like a paragraph in between. And now we just list all the operations that the calculator should support. So one is addition and a new line, or let's just say 1, so it's a bit clearer what the user has to enter to get to the actual operation. And I'm just going to duplicate this line a couple times. And now we 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That should be enough. We have 4 base operations, and then so we only need 7. And that's gonna be let's say add, subtract, divide, multiply, then exponentiation, square root, and well, I'm not sure how it is actually called in English, but I'm just going to call it Gaussian sum. In German we call it the small Gauss, der kleine Gauss, which is a small formula which does this summation of the first n natural numbers. Okay, so that should be it. No, there's one more. Actually, we need 8 because we need to be able to exit the program as well. Or let's say quit. Okay, so let's see if this works. That looks okay. So now we have to actually put this in the loop so the program keeps on running, because now it just prints the menu once and then it's done. So we need a loop to continue running it until the user says quit, and we will just make an infinite while loop and call this function inside of the loop. Remove that one. And now we should see it printed over and over. Yep. So we can stop that. So now we have to implement a way for the user to actually input their choice. You can accomplish that in every programming language. So if you do not right now are coding in C++, you have to look up how you do this. But in C++, there is a function called getLine, and it needs a string variable, or it gets a string variable as a parameter. Just gonna call that user input, and you just say getLine. Now we have to, the first parameter is the input channel, so this is the console input, cin, and the second parameter is the variable. And I'm just going to directly print it into the console again, so we see what we put into the program. Print a new line. And what we also need is, we have to communicate to the user that he or she is supposed to input something now. So just say choice. And now we don't use a new line here. Cot is not right. So let's just run this. Now we see the console, and you see it's behind the space, behind the colon, behind choice. And I'm just going to put in something, and it just prints it back to the console and then prints the menu again. So the next step now is to actually implement the branching into the different operations depending on what the user input was. We're going to do this with a switch statement. I'm just going to implement the cases, and let's just start with one. Let's say addition. Okay, so there's a compiler error here. It says, well, we didn't input the variable to do the switch on. So let's just put in user input. And that doesn't work. As I said in episode 6, the switch statement only works on integer values. And this is a string. So I'm going to use another function which will convert the string into a integer. And let's say user input integer, or just, let's call it integer. And the function is called stoi, string to, I guess it's string to int. And we're just giving it the string user input. And now we have to replace this here, and now it works. So let's just implement that. For the sake of simplicity, we will restrict the types we can use to integer for now. We are going to add that to the exercise as well. So let's just continue. I'm going to add two new functions here. The first one will be a function for the add operation. We will just call that add. It will return nothing, so we give it the return type of void, call it add, and it gets two integer values, int a and int b. And all it does is it sums up those two values and prints them to the console. Okay, now we call this, and now we also need the values from the user. So we make a second function which will return an integer value, and it's called get user input as integer. And all it does really is, or are exactly those three lines. And then it returns user input integer. So that is fine. Now we need to, we can actually user input is this. And then we just change that back. Here we go. Now we take this function and call this once for actually we will put this inside of the add function as well. So we just exactly. We will not give this any parameters. As I said, this is live programming, so I might change my mind in the middle of coding. It will not get any parameters, but we will have those to be defined here. We should actually print something here as well, so the user knows what's happening. Input the first value. Now we copy that and paste that in front of that. Input the second value. And that should be fine now. So let's see what happens. We get a compiler error. Identify, oh yeah, well, this is a good error as well. This add function doesn't know the get user input as integer function because it's defined after it. So the compiler goes from top to bottom. It arrives here. We tell the compiler to call this function, but it didn't encounter it yet, so it can't call it. What we can do is we can move it in front of it, but there is also something called a forward declaration, which just means you just tell the compiler there is a function that's called get user input as integer, and now it knows it. So when the compiler gets to this point in the code here, it already encountered this name. Now if we run this, it should run now. Yeah, this looks fine. So now we say 1 for add. Input the first value, 2. Input the second value, 5. 2 plus 5 is 7. Nice. Now we just copy this 4 times. And we change the names to subtract, divide, and multiply. And those are all fine. We just have to change the values here. That's a minus b. That's a, like not the values, but the operators. The divide, we have to now, we saw that as well in one of the earlier episodes. If we save the value of a division in an integer, we will cut off the decimal points. So we have to use a float value here. We just add this here and say I think 2 was subtract. Yeah, 3 is division. And 4 is multiply. Let's try that. I can already tell you that this won't work because we have to cast those two. Like we have to tell the compiler that it should treat those values as floating point values. It's called casting. You cast an integer into a float value. And in C++, you do this with the static cast function. Alrighty, so add 2 and 3 is 5. Subtract 3 and 3 minus 4 is minus 1. We have to change the operators in the print statements as well. And this is subtract. Let's try it again. 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 is minus 1. You can see it's not very readable here because it jumps like instantly the menu. So We should change that as well, but let's continue with testing the functions. Let's say 4 divided by 3 is 1.3. That's all right. And then we have multiplication. It's 3 times 6 is 18. Every loop should end with press any key to continue. And since we do not want to save this value, we can use the get function. So 3 plus 4 is 7, and now press any key to continue, and now we get the menu again. So next up is the exponentiation. Let's just call that function exponent. Let's add that one here. I'm going to move this function up here. Remove that and put it here so they all know it. And now we add the exponent function. So now what do we need here? We need the base and the exponent. Input the base, input the exponent. So we are going to use a for loop. And we are going from int I equals 1, loop as long as I is equal to exponent, and increment I by 1 on every iteration. We create a variable called result, initialize that with 0. And how do we do this? We say result times equals base, but we have to not initialize result with 1, but with not with 0, but with 1. And that should work, right? 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. We're going to copy that here as well. And I'm going to put the debugger here. Let's choose 5. Let's say 2. Exponent is 3. Okay. So now result is 1. Times 2 is 2. So now 2 times 2 is 4. And 4 times 2 is 8. And that should be printed there as well. 2 to the power of 3 equals equals 4. I forgot the equal sign here. The loop has to loop as long as I is less or equal than exponent. So let's run it again. Put in 5, 2, that's 8. Try it again. 4, let's say 4 to the power of 3 is 64. Next up is the square root. For this one, we're going to use a C++ function. We only need one value. We say input value, and then we can remove that. And we can say square root equals, and there is a function sqrt. Just give it that value. And this is, it actually returns a double. So this is a floating point value with double precision. There's the console. Okay. 6 square root. Let's say 4. That should be 2. Let's say that again. Let's say 2. That should be 1.4. And just like one more. Let's take 25. That seems to work as well. So the last one is the sum of the first n natural numbers. I'm just going to call that sum of first nat numbers. Copy this one. So now we need the user to input the last natural number to add. Let's call this last number. So now there are really two ways to do this. We could use the formula I was talking about earlier by Gauss, but since this is a programming YouTube series, we will use the for loop. And this works the following. We start with 1. The loop is supposed to run as long as I is less or equal than what the user entered. And we increment I by 1 on each iteration. And we just make a sum variable and initialize that with 0. And we just say sum plus equals I. And we tell the user the sum of the first last number equals sum. Now we enter 7. Input the last natural number to add. Let's say 10. And that's 55. So this is correct, but to check that, let's just choose like a smaller number. Let's say 4. So 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10. So the last thing that remains to be implemented is the ability to actually quit the program. To do this, we introduce a new variable called run, which is going to be set to true. And now we say while run. So this is valid here because like run is a Boolean value. You could also say while run equals true. That's fine as well, but that isn't needed. You can just say while run. And in case of the user entering the value 8, we just set run to false. And we can say exiting the calculator. Thanks for using this software. Okay. So let's try this. 8. Exiting the calculator. Thanks for using the software. Press any key to continue. And that's it. So now to the homework. If we enter any non-numerical value, like nothing, for example, the program breaks. We put a breakpoint into the get user input as integer function, and we run it again. And now we are going through this. We will see we're asking the user for input. And we say nothing, for example. And it tries to convert nothing into an integer, which obviously fails. The same goes for if we are trying to enter b, for example. So what we would have to do here is to implement a check so that the user actually input a number and present them with the input dialog again. If we input like any other number, for example 1234, it says nothing, and it should say something, and we can implement that by the default branch. I actually said last time that you should always implement that, or when we covered the switch statement. And we just say invalid choice. Please try again. Okay, let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Invalid choice, please try again. So that's it with the exercise. I will put a solution to the homework on the GitHub repository, so you can check that out as well. And I hope you liked the episode. If you did, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. and we will continue with another theory lesson next time. I'm not sure what I will cover yet, but we will definitely go into advanced beginner stuff. So I wish you a nice time, and I hope to see you in the next episode. And until then, bye bye.